Welcome everybody to Planning Committee at Lichfield District Council on the 3rd of March 2025. This is a publicly broadcasted meeting that is streamed live via our website and available on YouTube. I would therefore ask you to conduct yourselves in an appropriate manner. I welcome those present in the public seating area and ask you to be respectful of the committee members, its officers, as well as those speaking. I ask that you remain seated and quiet during these proceedings. My name is Councillor Harvey Coggins, Chair of Lichfield's Planning Committee. In a moment, I will ask everyone participating to introduce themselves. Before doing so, can I remind everyone in the meeting to ensure that your mobile and electronic devices are either switched off or muted throughout the session. For those that have registered to speak, please ensure that your content is relevant and material to the debate in hand and that you are mindful of the allotted speaking time. If you go over this time, you will be asked to stop immediately. When speaking, please speak loudly and clearly so that those following from home, as well as those in the room, can see and hear you. Planning Committee is a non-political, quasi-judicial committee bound by National Planning Policy Framework, Lichfield's Local Plan and Supplementary Planning Guidance. Our decisions are informed by planning considerations tied to these policies, but it is not a pure science. We must weigh up benefit and harm when coming to a view. The arrangements for conducting this meeting will be as follows. Officers will introduce each application. Any members of the public who have registered to speak will then be invited by me to address the committee in turn. Members are reminded to keep their questions to the point and on matters of clarification for planning issues only. Technical questions or clarification of details of the application will generally be best directed to the officers. Committee members will then discuss and decide on the officers' recommendations on each application. May I also be clear that we cannot receive questions or comments from anyone in the public seating area. Please be assured that the committee will aim to thoroughly question and consider all matters before it in coming to a decision. When we come to vote on each application, I will initially ask all members to confirm that they are minded to approve the recommendations in the report by raising their hand. I will then ask those of you voting against the recommendations or abstaining to confirm the specific planning reason you are doing so. In the event of a vote being carried against the officer's recommendation, I will ask officers to comment on the validity of the planning reasons, and if recommended by officers, we'll ask members to vote again on whether to defer that item for a further report on those reasons. If for any reason a member is not present for the whole of an item, they will be asked not to vote on that application. I will now ask all members and officers to introduce themselves. So if I want to start on my left, please.
Yes, I am Christine Lewis. I'm the Democratic and Elections Officer and also Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Councillor Hugh Ashton.
Councillor Derek Cross.
Councillor Serena Mears.
Councillor David Salter.
Councillor Jamie Checkland.
Councillor Sonia Wilcox.
Councillor Sharon Taylor.
Councillor Di Evans.
Councillor Andrew Rushton.
Councillor Keith Vernon.
Councillor Jayad Agfifero.
I'm Ansel, Senior Planning Officer.
Wharton, Associate Planning Officer.
Stuart Evans, Legal Advisor.
Alison Sansel, Director of Planning and Regeneration.
Okay, thank you everybody. We'll go now to apologies for absence. So I've received apologies from Councillor Tom Marshall, Councillor Joseph Powell and Councillor Michael Galvin. Okay, thank you. That's number one. Number two, declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything? Councillor Evans, please.
Yes, Chair. I'm going to declare personal interest on application 24-01083, change of use, because I live in the road, although this property is a long way from me. It's just the fact that as I live in the road, I think I need to declare an interest.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? No, okay. That's declarations of interest done. Next, minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody got any comments on these? They all looked okay? All happy? Okay. If everybody's happy to accept them as true. Thank you. Everybody, yeah, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the planning application. So we'll move on to the first one for tonight. It is 24/00806/COUM Swinfen Hall Hotel, The Drive, Lichfield. So if we can pass on to the officers for the presentation, please.
This is application 2400806COUM, which is a change of use application involving the conversion of existing barns A and D into offices with the installation of a projecting balcony to barn A, conversion of existing barns B and C into wedding venue facilities, including a single-storey infill between barns B and C, installation of new fenestration and cladding, demolition of existing water tank to facilitate new car parking area with access arrangements, cycle store and landscaping. This application was originally taken to the 8th of January Planning Committee and was deferred on concerns over parking. The application originally needed to be taken to Planning Committee due to an objection by the Parish Council on barns B and C, which has the proposed use of a wedding venue. To clarify, the Parish Council are not objecting to the proposed offices in barns A and B. The application needs to be determined on its own merits and should be considered outside of any other matters that are taking place on site. To recap, the land edged in red is the application site, and the blue line is the land that is also owned by the applicant. This is the aerial photo of the site, and there are no listed buildings on the site. However, the site is within the setting of a Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed Swinfen Hall. To the west of the site is a small residential settlement of Swinfen and Swinfen Prison. The site is within the Cannock Chase Special Area of Conservation. However, there would be no mitigation needed for this application. It is also located within the Green Belt. This is the existing site plan, and it shows the position of the 4 barns currently located on site. The proposed site plan is showing all 4 barns along with the proposed parking and some indicative landscaping. The proposals incorporate a total of 53 parking spaces for guests. The parking spaces include 3 disabled spaces, and there will be a total of 16 cycle parking spaces provided on site for staff and guests. As previously explored, there is additional parking located elsewhere within Swinfen Hall grounds. Since the previous planning committee, an updated master plan has been produced. This master plan shows the wider Swinfen Hall Hotel with all parking areas. The following slides will go into more detail about the parking areas. Parking areas outlined in red contains 53 parking spaces, 3 of which are disabled spaces. The parking spaces located around the barn in red will be used only for vehicles associated with the wedding venue. Office workers will be made aware when an event is taking place. Should they still wish to access the office during this time, the staff member can use parking spaces elsewhere located within Swinfen Hall grounds. The parking area outlined in blue has a total of 144 spaces, 65 spaces within the former tennis courts, which is here, and 79 existing spaces, which are here. And there will be an overspill car park. This will be the overspill car park for the wedding guests. This will only be used when the area in red is at full capacity. Valet service will operate parking for guests. The vehicle will need to be dropped off at the entrance of the wedding venue, and a valet service will park the guest's car in the blue area. When it comes time for guests to leave, the car will be retrieved and delivered back to the entrance of the venue. By allocating these spaces and operating this system, it will ensure there is enough parking for all guests and will minimise noise near the residential dwellings. The valet service will be required at all events so that noise and parking standards are adhered to. The area outlined in black is the parking extension, and this includes 90 spaces. These spaces have already been approved under 21/01570/FULM. However, the extension has not been delivered yet. The parking extension will not be used for any events. There is a total of 287 parking spaces on site, 234 of the spaces within the blue and black outlined areas, and 53 spaces within their area outlined in red. It was determined within that no provision for coaches or minibuses will be provided, as guests tend to travel as groups within cars. Neither National Highways or Staffordshire County Council Highways have raised any concerns with this. Furthermore, the transport assessment states that the following spaces are needed to be policy compliant. There need to be 38 office spaces and 75 wedding venue spaces. With the parking around the barns in red and the existing 79 spaces, there is sufficient parking for the proposals. With the additional parking spaces approved within the 2021 plan, there would be more than an adequate parking spaces. Therefore, the parking provision is considered acceptable in terms of planning policy. This application is subject to conditions and a legal agreement. As stated within the previous planning committee, there are robust noise conditions put in place to ensure that noise levels are kept to an acceptable standard. The legal agreement will ensure that all parking, both proposed and previously approved parking, is delivered. The application proposes to use a legal agreement to ensure that the approved parking spaces are delivered before works can commence on site. A site management plan will be secured to ensure that the quantum of events taking place is controlled and in line with parking provision on the site. The legal agreement will secure the removal of the marquee, which is currently hosting events, and will secure the removal of the enforcement appeal, which will be also removed upon the approval of an application. Should the applicant fail to remove the marquee, the details within the legal agreement could be enforced. Finally, following legal advice, officers recommended using a planning obligation to require the land edged in red and the land edged in blue in the local plan, location plan, to be legally bound together. This would ensure that the parking approved within 21/01570/FULM can be used within the proposed application. It would also ensure that certain elements of the 2021 permission would become redundant and would not be implemented. Therefore, some elements of the application cannot be brought forward at the same time or in the same location as the offices and wedding venue. So this is the previous permission, 2021 permission, proposed a couple of different uses in this area, one being a spa, and there was some hotel rooms, and so that would not be able to come forward at the same time as the wedding venue because they are in the same location. We have also included an additional clause within the legal agreement, which puts a time limit on the legal agreement, which the legal agreement has to be signed post the decision of this committee. Should the applicant not sign the legal agreement within this time limit, the head of planning and regeneration has the power to refuse the application. In conclusion, the previous concerns that were raised at the planning committee on the 8th of January were parking and noise. To address the concern, parking spaces have been allocated to specific uses to ensure that there is adequate levels of parking for all uses, in particular the wedding venue. Along with the robust noise conditions to address the noise concerns, the location of the wedding venue parking away from the residential dwellings, as well as the valet service, will assist in providing adequate noise levels. This is especially helpful when guests are leaving later at night. Additional heads of terms have been included within the legal agreement to secure the application. There will be a clause within the agreement that states that it has to be signed within sealed within a set time period from the date of this committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was fantastic. Okay, so we haven't got any speakers on this application. And I would just like to remind everyone that this application was deferred at Planning Committee on the 8th of January regarding concerns over parking numbers, which we have just seen addressed. So now I'd like to go to any questions from any councillors, please. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Mears first.
Thank you. Good evening. Just ask for confirmation that it's a condition of the planning that the valet service will always be in operation if there's a wedding. It's not a case that it's out, it's optional.
So it would be secured in the legal agreement that it'd have to be at every single event. That is part of the legal agreement, and if the valet service was to never be provided, they'd be in breach of the legal agreement.
Thank you.
Councillor Salter next, please.
Yes, that's actually one of my points, and I'm very pleased to see that as a resolution. Certainly the work has been done to mitigate the problems that we rose on the 8th. I know it's not part of our in that respect. I just wondered, unless I've missed it, what allocation is there for EV because people travel to weddings some long distances. Car, you might not get home.
Yeah, that isn't something that is included in this
I was
permission.
wondering if you knew.
No.
Okay, Councillor Checkland, please.
It wasn't a direct question, it was more in relation to the valeting, and my understanding was, correct me if I'm wrong, that the valet will be in place when the capacity for the car park for the wedding venue exceeds the number around the actual buildings, or is it just have to be there all the time, even if they're parked next to it?
So the guests would be able to park their own cars within the red area. And then if that was full, that's when the valet service would take it to the other area. So I guess it would always be there waiting to be in operation.
Okay, right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. I have no questions, but fortunately, it looks as though the client has worked hard with our officers, and our officers worked hard, thank you very much, with the client to satisfy a lot of the concerns that we had at the previous meeting. And they've all been addressed that I can see with the notes that I've got. I would like to propose that we approve this in line with the recommendations of the officers.
Thank you. I've got a.
I would second that.
Okay, so we've got a proposal and a seconder, so we move to a vote now. Everyone that is in favour of approving with the conditions and unilateral undertaking, would you please raise your hand?
It's unanimous.
Yeah, okay, that's unanimous. That's passed. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we'll move on to the next planning application on the agenda. There are two parts to this planning application. Blackbrook Hall, London Road, Lichfield. So the two numbers we've got are 24/01190/FUL and 24/01186/LBC. I'll hand over to the officers for the presentation now, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application concerns Blackbrook Hall, a Grade 2 listed complex of traditional buildings, including a farmhouse and a range of formal agricultural buildings. In April 2024, Lichfield's Planning Committee granted permission for the buildings to become a wedding venue. Application 23/00444 FUL and 23/00445 LBC. This application seeks amendments to the two extensions to the north-facing elevation of the southern wing of agricultural buildings. These extensions provide an orangery for wedding breakfast parties and then the associated kitchen. The site is in open countryside within the West Midlands Greenbelt. As above, the farmhouse is Grade 2 listed and the associated buildings are Curtilage listed. The site lies to the east of the A38 and M6 toll. To the north is a band of trees. The south is a gravel parking area and access drive. To the east of the site is open countryside. Properties within the small settlement of Weeford lie to the northeast, although they cannot be seen in this aerial photograph. These two photographs were taken for the purposes of the first committee in January 24. So you can see an agricultural building here that is to be replaced with the orangery. Photograph 2 shows the location of the kitchen extension. These are photographs of the materials that are to be used for the construction of the extension. You've got some charred or stained timber cladding, some unstained Siberian larch cladding and some plain tiles for the roof of the kitchen extension. The northern elevations of the two buildings will be changed. The glazing of the orangery is changing from a single full height central opening, with the glazing adjacent covered by timber slats, to an arrangement of 2 3/4 height openings positioned on each side of the elevation, wrapping around the corner of the building on each side. There are also changes to the roof appearance proposed, which are relatively minor. The kitchen extension is gaining a door and is reducing in overall height, and the cladding on the front is changing, and the materiality of the elevation is changing too. On the western elevation, the glazed panels that were approved across the entire elevation, under further glazing obscured, by horizontal timbers are changed to 2 asymmetrical openings under vertical timber cladding. See how the corner glazing wraps around the edge of the building here. There is now a separate doorway. This elevation drawing also reveals that the orangery extension is reducing slightly in depth compared to what was approved in 2024. You can see it there. The changes proposed to the eastern elevation are similar to those proposed to the western elevation. Specifically, the glazed panels that were approved across the entire elevation, as you can see partly here. They were also under glazed horizontal glazing, which was obscured partially by horizontal timbers. It's also changing to a pair of asymmetrical openings under vertical timber cladding. Again, you can see how the glazing from the northern elevation wraps around to the eastern elevation. And this elevational drawing also shows that the kitchen extension is reducing significantly in depth compared to what was approved in 2024. How it comes in there. The floor plans confirm the reduction in the depth of the kitchen extension. The north of the kitchen extension will be an undercover seating area here, protected by a roof supported by posts. Elsewhere, there are no significant changes to the level of interference or alterations proposed to the fabric of the Grade 2 listed building. Councillors are advised that, as per the committee report, this application is not reopening discussions on the merits of the principle of development. The change of use to the wedding venue has been established by application 23-00444 FUL, and the works to the fabric of the listed building have already been established as under the associated listed building consent 00445 LBC. This application is seeking approval for the changes proposed to the external appearance of the orangery and kitchen extensions. The associated listed building consent is necessitated because the extensions are being proposed to a curtilage listed building. It is before councillors because of the objection raised to the alterations by the council's heritage officer. These have been provided in the committee report, as has the officer's appraisal of the changes, and the conclusion is that on balance there remains sufficient public benefits that allow the application to be supported. As there are no notable changes to the degree of intervention with the fabric of the listed building, officers also have no reason to object to the listed building consent application either. Therefore, councillors are invited to consider the visual impact the proposed changes will have on the to the approved development, or compared to the approved development. Officers have also confirmed the council's position on greenbelt and amenity, specifically noise, in the committee report. Councillors can afford these matters consideration too, bearing in mind the officer's conclusions within the committee report. There have been no updates on this application to publish that needed publishing in the committee supplementary document. However, since the publication of that document, officers identified a discrepancy between the draft conditions in the committee report and the conditions issued on the decision notice for 23-00444 FUL. So for context, it is important that conditions on the original approval that have not been discharged or conditions that simply require ongoing compliance are carried forwards and applied to any subsequent section 73 condition application. So condition 10 on 23-00444 is a brief and succinct condition requesting the submission and compliance with the noise management plan. Condition 16 on 23-00444 requires the installation of an internal noise limiter in line with details submitted to discharge condition 10. Condition 10 on 00444 FUL is becoming condition 9 on 01190, the application that you're considering today. Officers have erroneously used an old draft of condition 10, preparing the wording for condition 9, and this draft had a longer, more complex condition for the noise management plan, and it incorporated the requirement for the internal noise limiter. The wording ended up being simplified as a result of environmental health comments which were received ahead of the 8th of April 2024 committee, where this application, the application 23-00444 was approved. So for consistency, officers propose to revert condition 9's wording in the draft conditions to reflect the wording of the condition on the approved decision notice for 00444. It is also proposed to reinsert condition 16, so the internal noise limiter requirement is a clear and separate requirement. The informative will then be used setting out the requirements for the noise management plan, which again will reflect the wording on the original decision notice. So I appreciate that sounded quite complicated. Just to reassure, actions are being taken to ensure the council are imposing exactly the same requirements regarding noise on this application before you today that were imposed on the first application that was approved in April 2024. So with that in mind, and after careful consideration of all relevant matters, officers conclude the application before councillors this evening should be supported for the reasons set out in the accompanying report, in accordance with the conditions set out within the committee report for both the FUL and the LBC applications. Chair.
Thank you very much for that. We've got one speaker for this, so I'd like to ask the speaker to come up to their desk. Thank you, Mr. Simon Keane. You've got 5 minutes to speak. Your time will start when you start speaking. We'll start the timer, and then when you get towards the end, 30 seconds to the end, we'll give you a warning. Okay, if you'd like to start, thank you.
Evening all. Thanks for your time tonight. Just to reiterate really that this extension that we're discussing tonight replaces an existing steel-clad agricultural shed. And as such, there was a contemporary approach to the design from the outset, and that was established and approved really in the first application. The Conservation Officer's comments regarding a traditional arrangement for the glazing probably we feel is a little bit lost on the basis that a contemporary approach was accepted in the first approval. The proposals, as the officers explained, are of equivalent scale and size as the previous approval, and the materiality we have actually simplified. The only other thing really just to point out is that the fenestration in question is quite oblique to the main areas around the farmstead, so the two courtyards, which are the main points of focus within that historic arrangement. Actually, this elevation in question turns its back onto those two areas in question, especially the listed farmhouse. So again, it's really just to reiterate that this is a contemporary addition, and it was really agreed at this, really approved in the previous approval, and that approach was acceptable, and we're just really looking for amendments to that approach really. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Okay, councillors, has anybody got any questions? I'd like to start. Okay, Ashton, Councillor Ashton. Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just as a point of information, the two applications we've got before us, one mentions section 73, one mentions section 19. Just for information, could the officer please explain the difference between these two?
Of course, up until relatively recently, you couldn't effectively do a variation of condition to a listed building consent application. So you'd have to do a fresh listed building consent application in order to regularise the changes, but recent changes to the legislation have allowed variations to listed building consent conditions to take place under that section.
Okay.
Has anybody got any questions or comments? Councillor Mears first, please.
I think the cladding looks really attractive, and I was just seeking an understanding as if it will be used across the site as a whole or just on that one building, because I think it will tie in nicely if it's used further around the site.
The details before us are being approved for the extensions that you've seen. There are the condition, there's a condition remaining on the permission that will require details of materials for the two-storey extension that hasn't come forwards yet. So certainly when that comes forwards, we can look at securing a consistent approach from materials across the site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've visited this venue a couple of times for coffee, and the work that's being carried out down there is a massive improvement. It's a really, really nice place it's becoming. I very much like what these amendments that you've got here. I think that's going to improve it even further. Big improvement on the previous application, and I think the officers and yourselves have worked very, very hard to bring something really nice here to us, and I propose once again that we approve this application.
Second that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so we need to take each application number separately for a vote then. Okay, so if we start with 24/01190/FUL, that's the section 73 one. If we start with that one. Am I okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if we start with that one, if you could raise your hand if you want to vote for that one.
That's unanimous.
Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. And then the second one, which is 24/01186/LBC, that relates to section 19. If you could all raise your hands if you'd like to vote to approve that one.
That's again unanimous.
Yes, unanimous. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. Okay, on to the last one tonight. Application number 24/01083/COU. Over to the officers for the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
This application concerns a parcel of land that lies to the east of 238 Chorley Road, Burntwood. Numbers 236 and 238 are a semi-detached pair of dwellings that lie to the south of Chorley Road, beyond the built limits of Burntwood, within the West Midlands Greenbelt and opposite land within a national landscape. So just for clarification, the border for the national landscape is the east of A38 is to the east of 238 is a parking / turning area for occupiers of number 238. Garage, which officers understand is owned by the occupier of 236 Chorley Road, Burntwood. Officers would stress that land ownership is not a material planning consideration. The parcel of land concerned in this application lies to the east of the garage and was formerly an equestrian use with 2 buildings on it, which have both now been demolished. One of these buildings was a stables, and that had been granted permission in 1991 under planning reference L910973. The other building was never authorised by the planning department. You'll see these buildings in a few moments' time. This application is not seeking approval for any operational development such as buildings or structures. It is before councillors today seeking to regularise a change of use only, which has taken place following the removal of the buildings and the relocation of the fence line. The site lies to the south of Chorley Road and to the immediate east of 236 Chorley Road. To the north, east and south of the site is open countryside, and the land to the north and south is agricultural, and the land to the east is equestrian. The site is around 280 metres due north-east of the very edge of Burntwood, which cannot be seen in this aerial photographs. This is how the site appeared before works were carried out. This is August 2016. So that just to clarify, the stable building that was granted permission is this one here. Larger building at the back. This building at the front never received formal approval from the authority. It has now been removed. Following the demolition of the stables, the occupier of 238 Chorley Road has incorporated the rectangular parcel of land that used to contain the stables, as well as some of the paddock to the north and south of this, into the residential land belonging to and for the benefit of 238 Chorley Road. This has been achieved using a new hedgerow at the front, which you'll see in a moment, and a fence along the eastern boundary, and a new close border timber fence in the middle of the site here. So this photograph just looks over the fence and you can see the extension down to the southernmost area here. This photograph shows you the hedge at the front that was replaced. The 1991 decision notice referred to in the committee report in section 15 clearly shows extension of domestic curtilage. The description of the decision notice is a legal document, and the description of development on this is considered to be binding. Condition 2 refers to an amended drawing received on the 3rd of December 1991. The amended drawing referred to by condition 2 shows the boundary extension line being crossed out by pen. No boundary change written adjacent, and then a signature underneath. The drawing still shows an enlarged parcel of land, however, and officers do not consider it to unambiguously remove the extension of the domestic curtilage from the application. And once again, the stable building that you can see here circled, approved by L910973, was subsequently amended to a modest pitch roof structure. So it was a flat roof structure, and it was amended formally and then constructed. So councillors are advised that, as per the committee report, the permission L910973 can be regarded as extant for the purposes of decision making. That is, the permission was implemented in accordance with the conditions and approved plans, which means the time limit for any other works also permitted by the decision notice fell away. The council's legal advice has indicated that the presence of extension of domestic curtilage on the decision notice should be taken to mean that permission was technically granted for that too, notwithstanding the contents of the plan referred to by condition 2. Therefore, as per the conclusions reached in paragraphs 15.7 to 15.17 of the committee report for this application, the council must afford significant positive weight to this extant permission as part of the decision-making process for the application. Paragraphs 15.18 to 15.20 set out how, in the officer's opinion, a combination of planning conditions, including the removal of all development rights, as well as the securing of landscaping and boundary treatment information, serve to significantly curtail the freedom of future occupiers of 238 Chorley Road to develop the site and protect the openness of the countryside and West Midlands Greenbelt. A legal mechanism can also be used to prevent further implementation of application L910973. This is explored in section 16 of the committee report and results in the recommendation provided in section 19 of the committee report. Councillors are invited to primarily consider the principle of development, the impact of the development on the Greenbelt and the visual impact of the development. Due consideration also needs to be given to the impact of the change of use on the amenity of the adjacent neighbour, access and highway safety and ecology. The ecology officer confirmed that there were no objections to the application from an ecological perspective, subject to compliance with the recommendations of the submitted report. So a further condition has been recommended in the supplementary documentation to become condition 2 of the permission if councillors move to support the officer's recommendation. After very careful consideration of all relevant matters, officers conclude that the application should be supported for the reasons set out in the accompanying report, in accordance with the conditions as suggested in the report and in the supplementary document. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, any questions from councillors? Okay, start with councillor Mears, please.
That parcel of land, what's its classified use currently?
Question.
It was in equestrian use.
So it's currently
It wasn't.
agricultural land for equestrian use.
Agricultural use and equestrian use are technically can be technically different. So in this case, a barn, there was a stable on the land and horses were kept there and they grazed the land, but I believe that food was brought to them. So the land was equestrian in use. So we regard it as being equestrian use.
Thank you.
Okay, councillor Evans, please.
Yes, this site is very open and prominent, and it overlooks Gentleshaw Common as it goes, and as it goes up a hill. So it is really overlooked. It is an inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, as we've been told in by the planning officer, but also in the report. But we're where we are. We're where we are now, and I think that the best solution is to actually go along with what the officers recommended, getting all my words muddled, recommended, because if we refuse it now, we obviously will be in a difficult situation because of the permission that's on there, and it means that other things can go on there. It's unfortunate that in 1991 it was dealt as it was dealt with, and with a wiggly line, etc., which is not appropriate at all. But it is important that I think that we do make sure that there are PDF on there, because we do want to restrict anything else that's in the Greenbelt, because we are going against what is said about Greenbelt, because it's an inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. And I think it's a sad situation that the person who's got this property has actually put things there that really do not fit in with the area, such as that fencing, and they've removed the actual natural hedge and put laurel hedge in, etc., etc. And I think all those things make it a real shame. But I think that we really have to go along with what we're being asked to go along with now, because if we don't, we could be in a more difficult situation in the future.
It's okay, councillor Mears, please.
Thank you. On the photographs that we've been provided, it looks like they've already started using half of the area of land as lawn, and that they have already started using the area of land at the frontage of the house, and it's not tarmacked. But I think there's a premeditated intention to build on it because there's only hard standing there. I think it's clear as day what the intention is with this. I, for one, think it leaves an uncomfortable path for people to put up a two stable, then be able to convert that to residential curtilage or potential building easily. I have a mind to see red flags on this application. And I wonder what measures can be put in place to prevent dwellings being built on that.
Of course. The first thing is that officers, obviously I can acknowledge your concerns, but we must deal with the application before us, which is just regularising the change of use. So the applicant's or any future occupiers' intents with the land cannot be factored in. However, the decision notice effectively uses a more onerous version of the normal condition that we would use to restrict permitted development rights. So you can usually just take permitted development rights away from extending a house or for building an outbuilding. The condition that I've proposed removes all permitted development rights covered by the entire general permitted development order, which means effectively the land has absolutely no permitted development rights whatsoever. The significance of that is that it stops them being able to build an outbuilding, a stables or something next to the house on the land, and then in the future creep it into a dwelling house and then create something separate. Everything would have to come through the council as a planning application. So full control over how the land is developed in terms of buildings will be in the council's control in the future, and could be resisted with reference to relevant policies if they conflict with the policies at the time.
Sorry to jump straight in with another question, but outside of the permitted development rights, are there any other tools that they can possibly use to apply for development outside of that?
Well, they can apply for permission to do anything at any time. So the removal of the permitted development rights prevents them essentially building things that are granted permission by the government. So the permitted development order grants permission for various developments by the two householders and things like that. And we've taken those rights away. So everything they want to do needs a planning application to the council with the relevant information. And those applications, if they retract objections, they could come back to committee, etc. So there's full control over them.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop them asking for anything. So they could submit an application to the council for a dwelling house, a bungalow, a pool room, anything like that. It would have to then be considered against policy at the time that it comes in. We'd have to, but that would give us the opportunity to consider it, which is what we don't get if it's permitted development.
I see. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Rushton, please.
I just really wanted to know what Councillor Evans said. The changes that were made and added the parcel of land, and I think this is the correct step to take. So if Councillor Evans did approve, I'm very happy to second.
You put approval, Councillor? Yeah. Okay, so we've got Councillor Evans proposing it and Councillor Rushton seconding that, so we'll move to the vote. Those that would like to approve this, can you please raise your hand? No.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you everybody that's voted to approve. Those that are against? Is that abstain?
Again, sorry.
Oh, against, sorry, yeah, thank you. Okay, so that has gone through, thank you. Okay. That brings this meeting of the Planning Committee at Lichfield District Council to an end at 18:40.